Hey friends, it's Sara Civian on the Toronto Sports Rush channel, part of the Bet Rivers Network. I'm joined by channel contributor and all-around legend, Pierre McGuire. Pierre, are you ready to break down the Leafs' 4-1 win over the Blackhawks?
I sure am, Sarah, and it's nice to be visiting with you.
You too, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you very much. I watched two games tonight. I watched obviously the New York Rangers and then losing to New Jersey, and then obviously watched Toronto. And the biggest thing about Toronto was just the tempo that they're playing the game at right now. Their passing ability, Sarah, has been phenomenal. It really has been.
The passing ability, the finishing ability, we'll agree that this wasn't the most dominant 4-1 win in the history of this sport, right? The Leafs were outshot, but in all of this, we got Auston Matthews' first goal since his return from injury, a John Tavares floater, a Fraser Minton goal 20 seconds after the Blackhawks' only goal, and a Matthew Nyes empty netter to seal it. Can you start us out with your strongest overall takeaway from tonight's game?
The passing ability of the Toronto Maple Leafs, especially early on in the game, they pushed the tempo of the game because of their passing ability, Sarah. And it's not just with their forwards; it's how they transition the puck from their defense to their forwards and then flow through the neutral zone. So I think that's really something that stood out to me. The other part is their penalty killing was perfect against Chicago. And finally, when they had to come up with some defensive stands at the end of the game, they were able to do it. Something that we haven't seen from them in a very long time.
Yeah, that does feel like their biggest improvement this season. And you look at Chris Tanev, and that's probably the number one reason. You talk about the passing. You might expect hits from him maybe in these years past, but he's hitting less than ever now, and he is passing in that way that really transitions so strongly.
You know what's interesting about Toronto? You talked about Tanev. You're spot on it with Christopher Tanev. Sense of familiarity. Brad Living brought him from Vancouver over to Calgary when he was the general manager there. Oliver Ekman Larson. Brad Living knew his body of work from Arizona when he was working there, and then obviously gets to know him and brings him to Toronto as a Stanley Cup champion. I think those two players in particular have really helped grow the brand of the Toronto Maple Leafs. But another guy that's not going to get nearly the same fanfare on their defense, Simon Benoit. That penalty killing we're talking about, the shot block we're talking about with Toronto, and that overall grinding mechanism on the back end, those three guys have really supplied it. I think that's a big reason why Toronto's so different right now.
That, and of course, your best penalty killer has to be your goalie. Anthony Stolarz got the dub after losing two of his last three starts. How did the bounce back effort look to you?
Really solid, I thought, especially early on. You talked about Chicago out shooting Toronto. You're spot on about that. And I thought Anthony Stolarz made some big saves early on in the game where it looked like Toronto was going to run away with it, even though Chicago put pressure on him. But the other thing to me about Stolarz is he's 6'5", 6'6". His athleticism, his flexibility. He looks like a smaller guy that's really quick in goal. I thought this past summer was one of the better acquisitions in the National Hockey League, and I still feel the same way, Sarah.
What do you make of the Stolarz Wall tandem so far, and how would you proceed if you're Craig Berube?
Just go with the hot hand right now. I know that Joseph Wall played tremendously well down in Tampa this weekend. Especially, I thought there was one save he had in the first period when the score was 1-0, Sarah, in favor of Toronto against Mikey Esamon. And I can just tell you, I think Joseph Wall's great. I watched him a ton when he played at Boston College, and I've watched Anthony Stolarz. His first game, I think I watched him play in Nebraska Omaha before he left to go play for the London Knights. It's amazing to see where they both are in their careers. I just think they have a phenomenal tandem, and they're probably a 1A, 1B type situation.
It really feels like that's the ideal way the league is moving right now, with kind of you have to have two starting goalies.
Well, you know that so well from your time in Boston. You think about where the Bruins were last year with Swayman and obviously Olmark. Olmark goes to Ottawa. Swayman stays in Boston. They both look kind of discombobulated and they're not together. And that's just one example. You see what's going on right now. Thatcher Demko not playing in Vancouver. They're having to do it by committee. Kevin Lankinen, 10 straight wins on the road. First goalie in NHL history to ever do it. So I think you're right about what you just said. The tandem operation works pretty well in this NHL.
Absolutely, Pierre. Zooming back into tonight, who do you think, if you had to name three impact players, who are they for you?
One would be Stolarz for sure. I think you've touched on it. The other one would be Christopher Tanev. And the third one would be Johnny Tavares. I think John Tavares has played so well right now, Sarah. I don't know whether he's going to make Team Canada or not for the Four Nation tournament, but I tell you right now, he's given it everything he has to try to be on there. And, Sarah, who has handled losing a captaincy with more, I think, poise and eloquence and professionalism than John Tavares.
Right, I was, like, clowning on that a little bit at first, but he made me eat my words so hard. The transition of that, the respect that he showed to the game, to Matthews. He had his kids in the Matthews captain jerseys. It was adorable, and he knew what it took, like, as a true silent leader, you know what I mean, to kind of usher in this new era of Leafs hockey.
I do know what you mean exactly. What I like about it the most, the respect he has for the captaincy, the respect he has for being with an original six franchise like the Toronto Maple Leafs. And the third thing is, he was a kid that grew up watching this team
Mhm.
play. And all of a sudden, he's thrust into the captaincy and he loses it. But rather than pout and mope and cry and say, hey, get me out of here, I'm staying. I'm going to help us be better. And he has. He really has.
It does feel like the pressure might be off a little bit. I feel like his shots are going in that maybe he wouldn't have like when he was snake bitten a few years ago. Like, is he really ever snake bitten? It's John Tavares, but still, it just feels like more happy go lucky.
It's such a good point, but it's true, and it's true. Think about what happened when Saturday night down in Tampa when he's got players draped all over him. Jake Gensel in particular, he finds a way to get a backhand past one of the better goaltenders in the league, and Andre Vasilevsky. And then tonight, again, just finding a way to create separation in the offensive zone and just putting the puck in short side. I mean, it's phenomenal to watch him play right now.
Nyes and Matthews are both 2 games deep returning from injury. They both look pretty solid. First, what are you seeing from Nyes?
Well, Matthew's just so big, strong, and fast. It's amazing to see. I remember watching him obviously with the U.S. National Team Development Program, and then at the University of Minnesota, and you could just see that trend. I remember hearing all the pundits say, "Oh, he's going to need time with the Marlies," and I'm like, "Oh no, he's not. He's going
No.
to be ready to play in the NHL right now." And he really is. And you can just see there's chemistry there. There's obviously respect for Auston, and I think Auston respects him just as much as he respects Auston. So in terms of Auston, Austin's starting to get his hands back. You could see it. He called it rust the other day, even though he had 2 assists down in Tampa. Phenomenal player, great poise with the puck. Obviously, a tremendous leader, and the intensity levels there for him. And I think he wants to be part of a winning program, not one that's underachieving.
Nice. You bring up the size and the strength, and it's like that kind of is the new look Leafs. I mean, and it's not maybe in the way you expect. I mean, I know people were criticizing the off season for, oh, they're just trying to get tougher and bigger, but it's not like that. It's like the power goals are happening and the power moves to turn defense into offense.
There's not a lot of teams in the league that can play 5 forwards on the power play like they do. And they did it even at the end of a game tonight, where a lot of coaches would say, hey, you know what? We got a 2-1 lead, we got a 3-1 lead. We're just going to sit back and control things. They went for it. They went for the jugular. I think that's a huge message from the coaching staff to the confidence they had in the players. And I think the players love that. They respond to that, especially star players. But I love your point about the physicality. Yeah, they're a big physical team and they're a heavy team. Think about the players they don't have right now just because of injuries. Max Pacioretty, David Kampf, Calle Yarncrook, Dakota Murmas, Max Domi, Bobby McMahon. I mean, you go down the line, those are all big people. There's no small guy in that thing. They're a big team. They're a fast team. They're a skillful team. And I have to tell you, Sarah, this is probably the best Toronto team I've seen since the late Pat Quinn was running it. And that's a long time ago.
It feels just so complete, right? They have it all. They have the size, strength, and skill, and they have the confidence, it seems. What do you think Craig Berube's impact has been with the confidence front?
Huge. Mike Van Ryan, the same. Lane Lambert, the same. Mark Savard, the power play started slowly. Now it's starting to evolve.
Oh,
Their coaching staff is strong. It's firm. It's got some chutzpah to it. I like the fact that Berube can walk in there with a Stanley Cup ring. Mike Van Ryan can walk in there with a Stanley Cup ring. Lane Lambert's been a head coach in the league. He's got a Stanley Cup ring as an assistant coach with Washington. There's a lot that I like about the staff, and I think Craig's made a huge impact. Just those little demonstrative moments with players, challenging them to be better, pushing them to be better, and everybody can see that. I think that speaks volumes as to the confidence he has and the street cred that he has with the players.
you bring up the whole squad, even Curtis McElhaney, who's doing some stuff with the goaltending. He's such a great journeyman. I know that he can help navigate this situation well. It really is a stacked from top to bottom coaching staff.
There's no question. It really is. And I think that was part of what Craig wanted to do when he went. That's part of his vision. He wasn't worried that Lane Lambert had been a head coach before, that he'd won a Stanley Cup. He knew Mike Van Ryan from his time in St. Louis. He knew Mark Savard, obviously this time in St. Louis. So I just think there's a credibility thing with that staff that really matters a lot.
And finally, I wanted to ask you what you've seen from Bedard this season. I know it's a little bit of a sophomore slump, but that's not uncommon.
No, it's not uncommon at all. Part of it is if you're going to create points in this league, and Auston Matthews learned this really well, you got to learn how to play defense. You got to learn how to force turnovers. You got to learn how to quick counter the puck. It seems to me, Sarah, at this point, his defense isn't good enough to create a lot more of that offense. And because so many people are keen on him offensively, he needs a little help from his wingers.
Yeah.
I think it'll come for him. There's still a big work in progress when you talk about where the Chicago Blackhawks are right now.
It's all part of the process, and one guy can't do everything. And you look back on these years for these players, and that's really when the defensive fine tuning happens. You have to learn the hard way.
There's no question. One of the reasons why I think Macklin Celebrini's having so much success right now, I remember before watching him play a ton at BU, by the way. And I said, he's Jonathan Taves with a little bit more offense. And that's really how I see him, Sarah. I see Jonathan Taves was a tremendous player when he came out of University of North Dakota to join the Chicago Blackhawks. Never saw the inside of an American Hockey League bus. And Macklin Celebrini's the same, except there's one thing he does that Jonathan couldn't do. He can score from distance. His shot is exquisite. And he's got a little bit more size than Connor Bedard. So
Mhm.
it's going to be interesting to see how those two go head to head. But I would just say this: Connor's going to be an extremely talented guy for a long time.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts you want to end on about tonight's game before we wrap it up?
I had more fun with you than the New York Rangers had playing against New Jersey, and I think I had more fun hanging out with you than the Chicago Blackhawks had traveling into Toronto to play tonight.
We're clearing a low bar, but I will, in fact, take it. Thank you so much, Pierre.
You got it, Sarah.